Italy's president shook hands with Alex Eala, and the tennis world has not stopped talking about it since. A 20-year-old girl from the Philippines walked into the most powerful room in Rome, and for one brief, electric moment, an entire nation held its breath. Nobody planned for this. Nobody scripted this. And yet, when that image hit the internet, millions of people, from Manila to Milan, from Los Angeles to London, felt something shift inside their chests. What started as a tennis tournament in Rome became something far bigger, something that transcended sport, transcended borders, and reminded the whole world why we fall in love with athletes in the first place. This is the story of that moment. Stay with us, because by the time we reach the end of this video, you will understand exactly why it stunned the tennis world and why it will not be forgotten for a very long time.
No, I think I moved well today, and I took my chances when I needed to. I'm very happy with this week because I do see the improvement on clay court. Especially when you compare it to my experience here last year. I'm really happy with how I've been playing and the work I've been doing off competition with my team.
There is something quietly poetic about the city of Rome. It has witnessed emperors and gladiators, conquerors and artists. It has seen greatness arrive, stumble, and rise again across thousands of years of human history. And in the first week of May 2026, it was about to witness something it had never seen before. A young Filipina tennis player writing her name into the eternal walls of the Foro Italico. Alexandra Alex Eala had been here before. In 2025, Rome was not kind to her. She walked onto the Pietrangeli court and was dismantled in under an hour. A brutal 6-0-6-1 loss to Ukraine's Marta Kostyuk that left her shaking her head and boarding a flight home with more questions than answers. For a player still finding her footing on clay, that defeat stung in a particular way. It didn't just hurt. It echoed. But here's the thing about Alex Eala that her fans know and that the tennis world is slowly learning. She does not stay down. She never has. She arrived in Rome on May 3, 2026, a Sunday. While most tourists were navigating cobblestone streets and gelato queues, Eala was already on a practice court, working. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a racket, clay beneath her feet, and the quiet determination of someone who had unfinished business with this city. At just 20 years old, turning 21 on May 23rd, Eala carried a ranking of world number 42. By the standards of where she had come from, that number was extraordinary. By the standards she had set for herself, it was just a milestone on a much longer road. She had made the semifinals of the Miami Open just months earlier. She had won WTA titles. She had beaten players ranked far above her with a brand of aggressive, fearless tennis that made even seasoned coaches stop and stare. But clay was different. Clay slows the game down. It demands patience, endurance, and a kind of grinding mental toughness that Eala was still developing. Her early clay swing in 2026 had been difficult. Early exits, unsteady footing, the kind of results that breed doubt in lesser players. Rome, she decided, would be different. And the Filipinos in Rome and around the world watching from home were watching with the intensity of people who understood exactly what was at stake. Richard Piel, an overseas Filipino worker from Batangas who had been living in Rome for 11 years, brought his wife Virgie and son Jeshard to every single one of Eala's matches and even her practice sessions. This is the first time in history we've had the chance to personally support a Filipino tennis player competing at this level, he said. He wasn't alone. Filipinos skipped work, flew in from London, drove in from Florence, all for a chance to chant her name on Italian soil. Laban Alex rang across the Foro Italico. Forza Alex, salamat. Rome had never heard anything quite like it. And that was just the beginning, because what happened next, nobody could have predicted. The Italian Open draws some of the biggest names in women's tennis. In 2026, the field was stacked. Aryna Sabalenka, Iga Swiatek, Elena Rybakina, Coco Gauff. These were not just tennis players. These were the dominant forces of the sport, women who had won Grand Slams and shaped the game's direction. Against this backdrop, a world number 42 stepping onto the court at Foro Italico was supposed to be a footnote, a first-round result buried deep in the bracket. No one had written Alex Eala's name in lights before this week, but she was about to write it herself. On May 6, 2026, Eala faced Poland's Magdalena Frech, ranked number 45 in the world, a seasoned clay court performer who had once reached a career high of 22. This was not a cupcake draw. This was a test, and Eala came out swinging. The first set was something out of a dream. Eala played with precision, power, and the kind of controlled aggression that sent Frech scrambling to all four corners of the court. A bagel, 6-0, completed in a blur that left the crowd gasping. But Frech came back in the second set, adjusting, fighting, reminding everyone watching that clay rewards patience. She leveled it at 3-6. Now it was a match. Now the nerves had to be managed. Now Eala's mental steel would be tested. She passed the test. 6-4 in the decider. 2 hours and 7 minutes of tennis. 6 break points converted, including the final one of the match. The Foro Italico crowd, mixed Italian and Filipino voices, chanting, clapping, erupted. "Salamat, salamat," Eala called out to the crowd as she walked off. "Thank you, thank you." But she wasn't done. 3 days later, on May 8, 2026, Eala faced China's Wang Xingyu, a player she had lost to just months earlier in Auckland. There was personal history here. Unfinished business. Eala went out to a 0-3 start in the first set, exactly the kind of shaky beginning that had undone her so many times before on clay. And then she found something, a gear that clicked, a clarity that settled over her like stillness after a storm. She won 6 straight games, took the first set 6-4, won the second 3-6. Their head-to-head record now stood at 1-1, and Eala had delivered her answer. For the first time in her career, she was in the third round of a WTI 1000 clay court event, not qualifying, main draw, third round, against a field that included the best players on the planet. Filipino Olympian E.J. Obiena, one of Philippines' greatest ever athletes, was spotted in the crowd cheering. The image spread instantly online. One national hero watching another in real time, in Rome, together. The tennis world was starting to pay attention, and inside the marble walls of the Quirinale Palace, the official residence of Italy's Sergio Mattarella, a name had come up in conversation that no one there had expected: Alex Eala. Here is what you need to understand about the Quirinale Palace. It sits at the highest point of Rome's 7 hills, overlooking the entire city. It is the seat of Italy's head of state. World leaders, Nobel laureates, Olympic champions, these are the people who walk through its gilded halls. It is not a place where a 20-year-old tennis player from the Philippines, ranked number 42 in the world, would typically be expected to stand. And yet, the 2026 Italian Open had already drawn the ATP's own chairman, Andrea Gaudenzi, to a formal meeting with President Sergio Mattarella at the Quirinale at the start of tournament week. This was tradition, Italy's head of state embracing the sport that had captured its nation's heart. Mattarella is known as a genuine sports lover. He opened the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan. He hosted Italy's football champions at the same palace. He attends the Italian Open final personally, sitting courtside with quiet dignity, watching tennis as though each rally matters to him personally. What was different this year was what happened on the margins of that tradition. As the tournament unfolded and Eala's run captured the attention of media across Southeast Asia and beyond, the Filipino community in Rome, Thousands of overseas Filipino workers who call this city home began making noise in a way Rome had not experienced before. Their presence at Foro Italico was impossible to ignore. Their joy was contagious. Their flags, their chants, their tears. They were no longer just tennis fans. They were a community that had found its symbol. Word reached the presidential palace, and in the way that extraordinary moments often happen, not through formal planning, not through PR strategy, but through the organic gravity of something real, an invitation was extended. Alex Eala, amid her tournament run, was asked to attend a brief reception at the Quirinale, and there, in that hall of history, Italy's 84-year-old president, Sergio Mattarella, extended his hand to a 20-year-old from the Philippines. When the photograph surfaced online, it did not spread slowly, it detonated. Within hours, it was on every Filipino news channel. Within a day, it was on international sports platforms. Comment sections flooded with emotion. She walked in as a tennis player and walked out as a symbol. Italy just gave the Philippines a gift it didn't even know it needed. I'm crying and I don't even watch tennis. Even people who had never picked up a racket understood the weight of that image. An old man who had led a nation through pandemics and wars, standing before a young woman who had carried an entire country's hopes on her shoulders across clay courts and hard courts and every kind of surface in between, and both of them, in that handshake, recognizing something the other represented. But here is where the story gets even more complicated, because not everyone was celebrating. It would be easy to tell this as a simple feel-good story. Girl travels to Rome, makes history, shakes hands with the president, world claps. But the truth, as it always is, has more texture than that. The moment Eala's reception at the Quirinale became public, a segment of voices online pushed back, and their pushback revealed something deeper about the tension that surrounds rising stars, national identity, and who gets to be celebrated. Some Italian sports commentators questioned the symbolism. Why was a foreign player, not Italian, not ranked in the top 10, receiving this kind of presidential recognition during a tournament that had Italian players also competing? Where was the same energy for Yasmin Paolini, Italy's own Grand Slam finalist, when she had needed a boost? The questions were pointed and, in isolation, not entirely unreasonable. But they missed the larger story. Because what was happening in Rome in May 2026 was not just about rankings or nationalities. It was about what sport does when it crosses borders. It was about what happens when a young woman from a country where tennis is not even a mainstream sport walks into one of the world's most elite tournaments and refuses to be invisible. Then came the noise from another direction. Back in the Philippines, the political dimension was impossible to ignore. Alex Eala had previously been the subject of viral disinformation, fake news posts claiming she praised government officials in emotional speeches that brought leaders to tears. None of it was real. Eala herself had spoken about it, calmly and directly. That's not really under my control. I don't have power over what other people post. I am aware that there have been a lot of fake news articles. Now, with a real, documented, extraordinary moment, an actual presidential handshake, this time in Italy, the noise around it went into overdrive. Exaggerated claims began circulating. Fact-checkers scrambled. The truth was extraordinary enough on its own, but the noise around it threatened to drown it out. Through all of it, Eala remained composed. That composure is perhaps the most impressive thing about her, more impressive even than her tennis. She navigated the noise the way she navigated a Rybakina serve, carefully, with purpose, without flinching. And the Filipino community in Rome, the ones who had been there, who had watched every match, who had chanted her name until they lost their voices, they knew what was real. Richard Peel said it simply: all the sacrifices, our time, effort, and money, were worth it because this is the first time in history we've had the chance to personally support a Filipino tennis player competing at this level. No disinformation could touch that. No political noise could erase what had happened on those clay courts and in that palace. The question now was, what did it all mean? And what was coming next? Alex Eala came to Rome carrying the weight of a nation's hopes and a city's painful memory. She left having rewritten both. A viral image, a presidential handshake, a tournament run that made history, and 7 words on Instagram that said everything a press conference never could. Rome heard her this time. The only question left is, who's next? If this story moved you, if you felt even a fraction of what the Filipinos in that stadium felt when Ayla shouted "Salamat" to the crowd, then hit that subscribe button right now. We cover women's tennis the way it deserves to be covered, with emotion, with truth, and with the respect these athletes have earned. New videos drop every week. You do not want to miss what is coming next, especially with the French Open just around the corner. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's watch history together.